Or he's the man who reportedly bottomed out so hard during the 1980 finals that he considered the unthinkable. The weight of that history is heavy. According to court records, in March of 1971, the United States Supreme Court handed down a landmark 7-2 decision in his favor, effectively ending the rule that forced players to wait 4 years after high school to go pro. He was a revolutionary, a man who fought for the right of a young black athlete to earn a living when his family needed it most. Yet, fast forward less than a decade, and the narrative had shifted from triumph to tragedy. During the height of the Lakers' Showtime era in June of 1980, major sports media reports confirmed that Haywood was suspended right in the middle of the NBA Finals. Television coverage at the time focused on the shock of a championship team sending a superstar home during the biggest series of the year. The official word was conduct detrimental to the team, but those close to the situation knew the truth was much darker. There was a visible decline, a lack of focus, and rumors of a destructive dependency that was beginning to swallow him whole. Why did a man who had conquered the highest court in the land find himself unable to stay awake during a team practice with a ring on the line? To understand how the hero of 1971 became the outcast of 1980, you have to look back at where the drive first started, in the soil of the Deep South. Spencer Haywood's story doesn't begin in a sparkling arena. It starts in the brutal heat of Silver City, Mississippi. For many of you who remember the stories of the Great Migration, Spencer's journey will sound familiar. He was one of 10 children born into a world where the options for a young black man were few and the obstacles were many. In his memoirs, he recalls picking cotton for a mere $2 a day, a grueling existence that built a physical and mental toughness that would later define his play on the hardwood. He wasn't just playing for a trophy. He was playing to escape a cycle of poverty that had claimed generations before him. In 1964, seeking a different life, Haywood made the move north to Detroit to live with his brother. It was a massive cultural shift, moving from the quiet, oppressive heat of Mississippi to the loud industrial pulse of the Motor City. It was here that the world first realized he wasn't just a big kid. He was a phenom. By the time he was a senior at Detroit Northern, he was a force of nature. According to Basketball Archives in 1967, he led his high school team to a state championship, putting up numbers that made him the most recruited teenager in the country. In interviews, he said something close to the idea that the basketball court was the only place where the rules finally felt fair. Reporters noted at the time that he played with a particular kind of urgency, as if every rebound was a matter of life or death. He spent a brief, dominant stint at the University of Detroit, but the world stage was already calling for him. He was barely out of his teens, but by the summer of 1968, he was about to become the face of American excellence in a place very far from the streets of Detroit. The 1968 Olympics in Mexico City were a turning point for American sports and politics, and right at the center of the basketball world was a 19-year-old Spencer Haywood. He was the youngest player on the team, but he played like the veteran leader. According to archive statistics from October of 1968, Haywood led the United States team to a gold medal while averaging 16.1 points per game on an incredible 71.9% shooting. He was a man among boys, a physical specimen that the international game simply had no answer for. When he returned home with gold around his neck, he was faced with a frustrating reality. The NBA rules said he couldn't turn professional until his college class graduated. But Spencer didn't have 4 years to wait. He had a family in Mississippi that was still struggling. He decided to jump to the American Basketball Association, joining the Denver Rockets. The impact was instantaneous. In the 1969 to 1970 season, Basketball Archives showed that Haywood put up a staggering 30 points and 19.5 rebounds per game, winning both the Rookie of the Year and the league MVP in a single swoop. Reporters noted at the time that the ABA was simply too small for him. He was outgrowing the league before he even turned 21, and the established NBA took notice. He was a superstar in a renegade league, but he wanted the prestige and the security of the big stage. It was this desire for more that led him to sign a contract with the Seattle Supersonics in 1970, a move that would trigger a legal war that threatened to shut down the entire league. When Spencer Haywood signed with the Seattle Supersonics in 1970, he wasn't just looking for a new jersey, he was looking for a revolution. At the time, the NBA had a strict rule that a player couldn't enter the league until 4 years after their high school class had graduated. But Spencer's family in Mississippi was still living in poverty, and he argued that he was a hardship case who needed to provide for his kin. According to public documents, Seattle owner Sam Schulman signed Haywood to a contract worth $1,500,000, a figure that sent shockwaves through the front offices of every team in the league. The NBA immediately filed an injunction to stop him from playing, leading to a legal showdown that went all the way to the highest court in the land. While the lawyers argued, the atmosphere in the arenas was incredibly hostile. In January of 1971, a particularly famous and painful incident occurred during a game where the public address announcer reportedly announced to the crowd, "We have an illegal player on the court," referring to Haywood. In interviews, Spencer recalled the humiliation of being escorted off the floor by team officials while the case was still being decided. Court records showed that the league was determined to make an example of him, but Haywood stood his ground, representing a generation of young black athletes who wanted the same right to work as any other American citizen. Reporters noted at the time that despite the boos and the legal threats, he never blinked. He was a pioneer who was being blackballed in real time, but he kept his head high and his game sharp. When the Supreme Court finally ruled 7-2 in his favor, it didn't just save Spencer's career, it fundamentally changed the DNA of professional basketball. With the legal battle won and his status as a legitimate superstar finally cemented, he was free to become the undisputed king of the Pacific Northwest. For the next few years, Seattle belonged to Spencer Haywood. He wasn't just a basketball player, he was a cultural icon, a man who combined high fashion style with a blue-collar work ethic on the boards. He was the first real superstar the Supersonics ever had, and he rewarded the city with some of the most dominant individual seasons in the history of the game. According to Basketball Archives, during the 1972 to 1973 season, Haywood reached his absolute peak, averaging a massive 29.2 points and nearly 13 rebounds per game. He was a perennial all-star, a first-team selection, and the blueprint for the modern power forward. Off the court, his life was becoming just as legendary as his jump shot. In 1977, his status as a global celebrity was cemented when he married the supermodel Iman. Major sports media reports and fashion chronicles alike followed the couple everywhere, portraying them as one of the first true Black power couples in the United States. They lived a life of luxury and prestige that seemed a world away from the cotton fields of Silver City. Television coverage at the time focused on his charisma and his status as the face of a rising franchise, making it seem like Spencer Haywood was untouchable. But as any veteran of the league will tell you, the higher you climb, the harder the wind blows. By the mid-70s, the Sonics were looking to shake things up, and the allure of the nation's biggest media market was starting to pull at Spencer. In 1975, the King of Seattle was told he was being sent to the bright lights and the unforgiving pressure of the Big Apple. He was headed to New York City, a move that came with a massive $2 million price tag and a set of expectations that no one man could truly carry. Joining the New York Knicks in the mid-70s was a dream for many, but for Spencer, it began a slow, painful decline. The trade was finalized in September of 1975, with the Knicks sending $2 million and player Gene Short to Seattle to secure Haywood's services, according to press conference transcripts from the era. The Garden faithful expected him to be the savior who would bring another championship to the city, but the pressure of Madison Square Garden is a different kind of beast. Almost immediately, reporters noted at the time that the chemistry on the floor wasn't right, and the legendary scoring touch he had in Seattle began to flicker. According to Basketball Archives, his production took a visible hit. His scoring average, which had consistently stayed above 24 points per game, dropped to a career-low 13.7 during his time in New York. The fans, who are known for their loyalty but also their bluntness, began to turn on him. He found himself at the center of a severe personal crisis, struggling to find his rhythm while the city's legendary nightlife began to offer a dangerous distraction. One version of the story says that the fast-paced social scene of Manhattan in the late 70s was where he first encountered the banned substances that would eventually derail his career. In his memoirs, Haywood would later admit that the stress of the city and the weight of his failing knees led him to seek out relief in the wrong places. He was a man out of sync with his team and his own body, and the rumors of his late-night activities were becoming harder for the front office to ignore. By the time the 1978 season rolled around, it was clear that the New York experiment had failed. Spencer was looking for a way out, and he found it when a trade was announced that would send him to Los Angeles to join a young rookie named Magic Johnson. When Spencer Haywood landed in Los Angeles in 1979, it was supposed to be the final piece of a championship puzzle. The Lakers were entering a new era under owner Jerry Buss, and they had just drafted a charismatic rookie named Earvin "Magic" Johnson. According to major sports media reports at the time, the trade that brought Haywood to town in September of 1979 in exchange for Adrian Dantley was seen as a bold move to add veteran toughness to a flashy young roster. On the surface, Spencer looked like the same physical specimen who had dominated the league for a decade, but behind the scenes, the bright lights of Hollywood were masking a rapidly growing shadow. It was during this first season in Los Angeles that Haywood's life began to spiral out of control. By his own account in his memoirs, he was introduced to a particularly dangerous way of using banned substances by a local socialite, and the habit took hold with terrifying speed. Basketball Archives and public records from that season show a player who was still contributing, averaging 15 points and 7 rebounds, but those numbers didn't tell the whole story. In his memoirs, he confessed to spending upwards of $1,000 a day on his habit, a staggering amount that began to erode his focus, his health, and his legendary work ethic. Television reports from the era often focused on the high-flying, fast-break excitement of the Showtime Lakers, but in the locker room, the mood was shifting. Reporters noted at the time that Spencer seemed increasingly distant and erratic during team meetings. He was playing for one of the greatest teams ever assembled, sharing the floor with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson. But the relief he sought in the pipe was becoming his primary focus. As the Lakers marched toward the 1980 postseason, the man who had fought the Supreme Court for his seat at the table was beginning to hallucinate in the very huddles where championships are won. By the time the Lakers reached the 1980 NBA Finals against the Philadelphia 76ers, Spencer Haywood was a shell of his former self. The team was on the verge of greatness, but their veteran forward was fighting a battle that no one on the coaching staff fully understood yet. The breaking point finally came during a team practice between games of the championship series. In a moment that has since become a somber piece of league lore, Haywood reportedly fell fast asleep during a stretching session on the gym floor. It wasn't just exhaustion from the long season, it was the physical toll of a destructive dependency that had finally caught up with him. The fallout was immediate and uncompromising. In May of 1980, the Lakers officially suspended Haywood for conduct detrimental to the team, a move documented in public records and widely analyzed by the press. According to television reports from the era, teammates had noticed him nodding off during film sessions and appearing completely detached from the high-stakes environment of the finals. Coach Paul Westhead, a man known for his disciplined approach, decided that the distraction was too great to ignore. While his teammates were preparing to hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy, Spencer was being told to pack his bags and leave the team. Reporters noted at the time that the locker room was divided on the issue, with the team even holding a vote on whether Spencer should be allowed to stay for the remainder of the series. The decision to send him home was a crushing blow to a man who had spent his entire life fighting to be respected as a professional. Banished to his home while the city of Los Angeles celebrated a world title, his isolation began to feed a dark, drug-induced paranoia. He felt betrayed by the organization and specifically by the man who had signed the suspension order, and his mind began to turn toward a terrifying solution that involved a $5,000 down payment. The period immediately following his suspension is perhaps the darkest chapter in the history of professional basketball. In a state of profound paranoia fueled by his personal crisis, Haywood began to believe that Coach Paul Westhead was the sole reason his life and career were falling apart. By his own account in his memoirs, Spencer's thoughts took a turn toward the unthinkable. He wanted the coach removed permanently. In June of 1980, while the Lakers were still reveling in their championship victory, Haywood reportedly traveled back to his old haunts in Detroit to seek out a childhood friend with deep underworld connections. This wasn't just a fleeting thought born of anger. It was a plan that began to move toward reality. According to his memoirs, Haywood reportedly paid a $5,000 deposit to a connection in Detroit to carry out a hit on Westhead. As some reports claimed at the time and in later retrospective interviews, the plan allegedly involved sabotaging the coach's car to cause a fatal accident. It is a chilling reminder of how far a person can fall when they are caught in the grip of a severe personal crisis and a destructive habit that warps their sense of reality. In interviews, Haywood later described this time as a blackout of the soul, where he was no longer the man who had won a gold medal or a Supreme Court case. He was a man hiding in a hotel room, waiting for news of a tragedy he had authored himself. Documentary beats from later years showed that the people around him in Detroit were actually prepared to follow through on the request, viewing it as a straightforward business transaction for a hometown hero. The hitmen were reportedly on their way to Southern California, and the clock was ticking down on a decision that would have changed the NBA forever until a single phone call from a small town in Mississippi reached through the haze. The intervention didn't come from the police, the Lakers front office, or a team of doctors. It came from a mother's intuition all the way in Silver City, Mississippi. According to interviews with Spencer himself, his mother Eunice called him during those dark days in 1980 and delivered a message that cut through the fog of his paranoia. She told him plainly, "If you do this, I will tell on you myself." She could hear the distortion in his voice and the echo of a man who had completely lost his way. She threatened to disown him or turn him over to the authorities before she would let her son become a murderer. In his memoirs, Haywood described the terrifying and delicate process of having to call off the hit he had set in motion. He was dealing with dangerous men in Detroit who viewed the situation as a business transaction, and you couldn't simply say, "never mind," to that kind of arrangement. According to public records and his own account, Spencer spent several days in 1980 hiding out in a Los Angeles hotel room, paralyzed by the fear that the very violence he had unleashed would now be directed at him. Television reports from that month didn't mention the plot, but they noted that Haywood had effectively vanished from the public eye following his suspension. Reporters noted at the time that the superstar who had once been the most confident man in any room was now a ghost. This was his rock bottom, a moment of clarity that came through a haze of fear and banned substances. He realized that to save his life, He had to leave the environment that was feeding his worst impulses. The fame, the pressure, and the availability of everything that was destroying him had to be left behind, and that meant getting as far away from the United States as possible. The next step for Spencer Haywood was an unconventional one for a player of his stature: a one-way flight to Italy. For the 1980 to 1981 season, he signed with Rare Venezia, trading the bright lights of the Great Western Forum for the quiet canals of Venice. It was here, away from the constant scrutiny of the American press and the easy access to his old habits, that he began the slow process of finding himself again. According to Basketball Archives, his time in Italy was incredibly productive. He averaged over 23 points per game and rediscovered the joy of the sport without the weight of the Showtime expectations. But the NBA wasn't done with him, and he wasn't done with the league. In 1981, he returned to the States to play for the Washington Bullets, a move that many in the sports world saw as a final chance at redemption. Archive statistics show that between 1981 and 1983, he played 114 games for Washington, successfully transitioning into a valuable veteran mentor. In television reports from that era, coaches praised his maturity and his willingness to share the hard-earned lessons of his turbulent past with younger players who were just starting their journeys. Reporters noted at the time that the explosive Haywood of the Seattle years was gone, replaced by a more grounded, reflective professional who played with a brace on his knee and a clear head. He had survived the storm that nearly ended his life, but by 1983, the physical toll of his career and his past lifestyle finally became too much to ignore. He walked away from the court for good that year, but as he transitioned into retirement, he found himself facing the hardest fight of all: staying clean and rebuilding a legacy that many thought was permanently tarnished. The decades following his retirement were a quiet, steady testament to resilience. In 1984, public records confirmed that Haywood entered a treatment facility to address his dependency issues once and for all, beginning a journey of sobriety that would last for the rest of his life. However, even as he rebuilt his personal reputation and became a successful businessman, there was a glaring absence in his professional life: the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. For years, his name was passed over, leading many in the basketball world to argue that he was being punished by the league's old guard for the 1971 lawsuit. The wait was agonizingly long, stretching across 3 decades while players with far fewer accolades were inducted ahead of him. Major sports media reports finally confirmed the news in September of 2015. Spencer Haywood was finally going into the Hall of Fame. It was a moment of complete vindication for the man who had picked cotton in Mississippi and fought the NBA all the way to the Supreme Court. Television coverage of the ceremony focused on his emotional speech, where he didn't just talk about his scoring titles, but about the hardship rule that defined his journey. Reporters noted at the time that his induction felt like the closing of a long, painful circle. He had been brought in from the cold, recognized finally as one of the most influential figures in the history of the sport. But as Spencer looked out at the audience filled with young stars who had entered the league early because of his sacrifice, he knew his story wasn't just about his own survival. He was the man who broke the doors down, and now it was time to look at the house that Spencer built. When you look at the landscape of the NBA today, you're looking at a world that Spencer Haywood built with his own hands and his own heartache. Every time a 19-year-old superstar signs a $100 million contract, or a young man from a struggling neighborhood uses his talent to change his family's zip code before he's even old enough to buy a drink, they are walking through the door that Spencer kicked open. It's easy to forget now, but the hardship rule was a radical idea that challenged the very core of how professional sports operated in America. According to major sports media reports in the 2020s, estimates suggest that hundreds of players have entered the league early since that 1971 ruling. collectively earning billions of dollars in salary and endorsements that would have previously been delayed or denied. For the generation of viewers who grew up watching the game evolve from the grit of the 70s to the global phenomenon it is today, Spencer Haywood represents the bridge between those eras. He was the man who insisted that a player's labor was his own, and that no institution had the right to keep a man from his livelihood. Public documents from the Retired Basketball Players Association, where Spencer currently serves as a director, highlight his ongoing commitment to making sure the pioneers of the game are taken care of. He didn't just win a court case and move on, he turned his survival into a mission. In interviews, modern legends like Kevin Garnett and LeBron James have reportedly reached out to Spencer to thank him for his sacrifice, acknowledging that their careers and their generational wealth began with his willingness to be the league's illegal player. Reporters noted at the time of his Hall of Fame induction that his story is a quintessentially American one. A journey from the cotton fields to the Supreme Court, from the heights of Olympic gold to the depths of a hotel room in a crisis, and finally, to a place of peace and sobriety. Television coverage today often frames him as the godfather of the modern player empowerment movement. He proved that you can stumble, you can fall, and you can even lose your way in the brightest of lights. But as long as you're willing to listen to the right voices and put in the work to heal, there is always a path back to the top. Spencer Haywood's name isn't just in the record books for his points and rebounds, it's etched into the very foundation of the league. He gave the NBA its future, and in return, he finally found a legacy that no addiction or lawsuit could ever take away.